Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry. For today's video, I want to talk about the Stirring Shadows Summon Showcases Part 1 and Part 2. These have been up for around a week or so and Part 1 is ending soon, so I wanted to give my impressions on these showcases. I got a couple comments asking what I thought about some of the new banners. So at a high level, right off the bat, I want to say that for most players, these are both probably a skip. We do have Gala coming up at the end of the month, around the time of the Mega Man event, and that will likely be a higher value showcase. And we just had a seasonal showcase in Halloween Fantasia 2, which was also more of a time to spend one's Wormite. So I think that nothing on these showcases really warrants pulling for, but there are still some interesting conversations to be had, some discussion, some thought-provoking new mechanics, so I do want to get into that a little bit. It's always kind of fun to peer into what's going on with new units, maybe suss out a little bit about the future and the direction of the game as well. I'm not planning on summoning on these, and I would say you should probably skip as well, but if you have summoned, I'd be curious to hear why and what you managed to pull. So that being said, let's start off with Stirring Shadows Part 1, since that doesn't have much longer right now. It only has a couple days. On this showcase, in addition to Lathna, who's brand new, you can also summon at a rate up for Curran. You can get Nyarlathotep, who was buffed fairly recently, and at 4-star there's Berserker, Kleiman, and Silk. So really, the only thing new on the showcase is Lathna, so unless you're crazy about Lathna and absolutely must have her, I would say this is going to be a pretty low value showcase. Curran is a good adventurer, but right now we're in a situation where unless you're building an entire team for something like the Mercurial Gauntlet, well, frankly, it's going to be harder to play anybody but Gala Cleo in the hardest endgame content for Shadow Adventurers, namely High Jupiter's Trial. So there's a small role for Audric to play in Master. He, along with 3 Gala Cleo, can clear pretty effectively, but as far as Expert, pretty much to this day, I only see Gala Cleo rooms, and if there's another type of room, it honestly seems like there's a lower probability of clearing successfully, so I don't know about either of these adventurers in this environment that has been created and allowed to flourish or maybe fester, especially with the way that Time Attack was published and we saw how dominant Gala Cleo was. But if for some reason you want a Shadow Adventurer, maybe you have your heart set on Lathna or you're thinking ahead and thinking, eventually, Light MG is going to come out. It's going to go up to level 55. I'm going to want a lance and an axe. Maybe there's some world in which Lathna and Curran could both coexist on a team, but I highly doubt it, but maybe one of the two could be there. As for Lathna, her whole mechanic, or her whole kit, is centered around the shapeshift mechanic. So her first ability is called the Faceless God. This makes her transform into Nyarlathotep regardless of whatever dragon she's equipped with, and in particular, it's a white variant of Nyarlathotep who can poison the enemy for 30 seconds with his skill. So that is unique to that form. It also grants her an HP regen buff for 20 seconds each time she shapeshifts. She has paralysis res of 100%, and then fitting with this shapeshift theme, she has dragon time of 20%. So as for her skills, Sundering Shadow, her second skill, just deals damage, but her first skill, Chaos Gift, functions very similarly to how Ramona's first skill functions. You can tap the screen to unleash additional blows up to a maximum of 4, and this has a built-in Punisher effect of sorts where poison foes take extra damage, and really, compared to Ramona's skill, this is only as powerful if the foe is poisoned. If they're not poisoned, this is just a marginal skill or moderate skill. It's not super powerful. It's not anything to write home about. If the foe is poisoned, it's considerably better, but within Lathna's own kit, she can only cause poison when she's transformed. And that poison only lasts for 30 seconds, and in most content, you probably get maybe 1 or 2 dragon transformations. Unless you're in a long wave-based mode, like defensive battles, if that ever comes back, or maybe if you're in a raid where you can shapeshift several times. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be able to cause poison very much using Nyarlathotep, and honestly, a lot of raid bosses can't even be poisoned, so I just think Lathna doesn't really have a whole lot to do. Fortunately, High Jupiter can be poisoned, but it's still going to be really hard to put together a team comp using Lathna in public lobbies, possibly even on Discord, because people want easier clears. And if you even put together a team with Lathna, you're really going to want a Delphi as well. So Delphi is the only Shadow Adventurer who can actually cause poison as part of his innate kit without shapeshifting in the way that Lathna does. So they are very good companions. Delphi's good on his own, but Lathna kind of needs Delphi to be good. But Delphi is a great adventurer, so if you happen to have him, they could be a nice core together. But really, I think that Lathna just requires too much. You know, she's too conditional. She needs shapeshifting. She needs poison. And ultimately, I feel like she is a pretty lackluster adventurer. The other thing I should say is, unlike somebody like Gala Mim, she's not able to boost her own dragon gauge in any way, so you're not necessarily getting more shapeshifts out of her. And Nyarlathotep doesn't really have one of the best dragon forms either, so although you'll probably be dealing pretty good DPS while transformed, it's not one of the upper echelon of dragons like Leviathan or Arctos or something like that. So all in all, Lathna, pretty easy skip in my opinion. And Nyarlathotep I'll briefly mention since he was powered up. So as you can see, the main Nyarlathotep, the grayish one, I guess, or purplish one, doesn't actually cause poison. He has this HP 30% equals strength plus 50%, so when his HP falls below that, you're not getting the strength buff, meaning he's still kind of one of the weaker 5-star dragons. But what they powered up was the second skill, so this used to be Last Bulwark and now it's Moonlit Howl 2. If the user's Shadow, you get the Bloody Tongue effect for 20 seconds when your HP drops to 30%. This gives you a 1-use shield that nullifies damage less than 60% of your max HP, and increases strength by 30%. So this effect lasts for 20 seconds, and I think that means that the strength buff of 30% lasts for 20 seconds, but the shield lasts until you take damage. And one of the ways that Nyarlathotep has become much better as a result is for something like the Mercurial Gauntlet at a higher difficulty level, so levels 51 and onward, the damage is unavoidable. So you're bound to fall to a low HP, but the great thing is, because of that, you often want to run a helper who is a healer or have some other form of passive healing on your team. Maybe it's a Phoenix, maybe it's a Freya. We've really yet to see what that is for shadow teams, but if you're going to consistently fall to this low HP and get the Bloody Tongue effect, and then heal up past 30%, so you're also getting the 50% aura, well, that starts to look really good. So Nyarlathotep actually has a niche now where he didn't before. I would still suggest that you invest into Shinobi or even Marichiten as a priority over Nyarlathotep, but if you're in a situation where you're very late game, you're actually trying to close out these really high difficulty Mercurial Gauntlet levels, then maybe you want to give him a nod. You're probably only at that point if you've dropped a few dollars on the game, so you might also just have a natural copy of Nyarlathotep that you can utilize. But that's all I want to say about Stirring Shadows Part 1, so let's go over and look at Part 2. On this showcase, we have Akasha and Vaster. We also have Silas. So all those who are hoping for Heinwald, unfortunately, he didn't get a raid up on either showcase. I think it's because he got a raid up randomly in the past on a dragon special. Maybe that's why they decided not to give him a raid up, but it's a little disappointing. I don't think it's too misleading to have one shadow and one wind focus, but it could also be that maybe they didn't want 2 healers. That's a possibility as well. Hastur, of course, is here, and we also have Musashi, Wedding Xania, and Rock. So no one who's really used that frequently. I don't see Musashi much. Wedding Xania, unfortunately, just has extremely high SP costs. Rock is fine, but not really used at an expert level and above, although it's possible. And Silas is interesting. He still has a pretty unique kit, but I also I can't vouch for how effective he can be. I know that with him not having Bog Res, it can be kind of a problem popping all of the bursting bubbles that appear in Master High Mercury's trial. The bullet hell section of that fight does get a little bit harder without Bog Res, because you can take some random hits. As for the new adventurer and new dragon, though, let's focus in on Akasha and Vaster here, or Hastur. Let me check. Yeah, Hastur. I was pretty new to the mythos, so I did enjoy reading some of the Reddit posts that explained kind of the situation and the backstory for the Stirring Shadows event. That was pretty fun. As for Akasha, she's a wind healer, as we've already said a couple times, and on paper, she seems great. First skill, heals, and grants regen. She has skill prep of 100%, which is great on healers, Bog Res of 100%, and a large extra healing or recovery potency effect as long as her HP is above 70%. So in terms of volume of healing, heals per second, she's great. The challenge for her is the environment right now. There's really not any content where you need this much healing, and in fact, the other Bog Res healer, Lowen, tends to be better because he can buff defense, he can buff max HP, and that tends to matter a lot more for the content we have right now. So I'll get into why. For different content, it varies a little bit. Think of something like an Astral Raid. In an Astral Raid, one of the biggest liabilities isn't necessarily how much you can heal, but it's actually that your adventurers get one shot. And so Lowen being able to buff defense and max HP reduces the probability that one of your adventurers just gets wiped out by, say, the crisscross attack that Valfair does. So that's why I think Lowen is actually better even in that scenario. For another scenario, let's think about High Mercury's trial. For standard difficulty, Lowen means that your run is going to be very safe. You can increase the max HP of your teammates. That will probably allow them to tank maybe one whirlpool by accident, maybe eat a bursting bubble and still survive. So if you're going to run a healer, he can heal plenty for the trial given everything's avoidable, while also increasing the tankiness and bulk of your team. So he's good for that reason. In expert, most people choose to forego a healer altogether, and the damage check is sufficient. If you run a healer, it's possible, but the damage check is such that you probably want to have Noelle in a beta role, and Wedding Alisan provides plenty of heals for the entire team, especially when there's a couple of them. So in that setting, there's really just not a role for somebody like Akasha. Although she could bait, we'll see in a moment that her second skill does favor her being closer to the team. So then we get to Master difficulty of High Mercury's trial, and in that battle, the challenge is you either want Noelle, so somebody who can bait and provides DPS in the form of buffs, or probably Lowen, because Lowen can use his defense buff, his HP buff, to lower the entry barrier in terms of HP check for the entire team, and make it so that they can easily run DPS Wormprints instead of having to run the High Mercury's Trial Wormprint. So even in that setting, if you are going to bring a healer, Lowen kind of is preferred. So that's basically why I think Akasha just doesn't have a role to play right now. And for something like the Mercurial Gauntlet, level 51 plus, often you'll want to pack a healer as a helper rather than actually have a healer on your team. So in that one setting, I could see her being pretty good because of her abilities, but that's essentially your helper helping somebody else's team out. So if one of your friends has Akasha, then yes, that Akashic Repose is pretty nice with the passives that she has for the Mercurial Gauntlet, but ultimately Lowen might even be fine in that setting, or maybe even Wedding Xania. It just depends on how stacked your team is, but I will say the regen there, that's probably the one true niche that she has. Now I want to come to her second skill, since I had really been avoiding talking about this, but I'll explain some of the flaws I see with it and the one area of potential I think it has. So this was kind of the most exciting part about her and the selling point when this banner was previewed, and Vital Gale creates a buff zone that lasts for 10 seconds and gradually fills the skill gauges of adventurers inside it. So as it turns out, this information is available on the wiki. It's been data mined, I suppose, for lack of a better word. This actually restores SP at a rate of 420 per 1.5 seconds, and this skill costs 20,000 SP to even cast. So it has a really high SP cost, and you're recovering by standing in the buff zone about 2,500 or so SP for your entire team, potentially. I say potentially there because that is the challenge I alluded to. If you're baiting with Akasha, you're going to be farther away from your team, and it's not a guarantee that they'll be inside that buff zone. Obviously, it's so slow to charge that you can probably feel comfortable saving it until you roll in toward your team and then use it, but still, you're really looking at maybe one extra skill, or even less than that depending on the weapon type, so it's not that great for how slow it is to activate. And the other thing I would point out about it is it only lasts 10 seconds. Now, having said that, the one area where I think this could be quite interesting is in a raid setting. I already mentioned why I think Lowen still probably reigns supreme in that setting, but one thing that could be kind of cool is the fact that you can have 4 Akasha, one on each team, all using a buff zone, meaning you could greatly fill the skill gauge of adventurers that were overlapped within those buff zones. At least that's what it sounds like to me. I don't see any disclaimer here of that not being possible. So that is one area where I think Akasha could be kind of fun and do something quite special if there is a harder raid that comes out. But honestly, I think that Lowen is going to be plenty for most people. So that's all I want to say about Akasha. Let's look at Hastur now, as I think he's probably the most interesting of everything on these couple of banners. So Hastur is our first dragon who has prime strength. He also grants 45% strength to the adventurer he's equipped to, and he has a skill which deals damage and can inflict sleep. So the cool thing about Hastur is he is a great dragon for single player to equip to your weaker AI to power up your strong lead player-controlled adventurer. So imagine you're leading with somebody like Victor, maybe Addis. This prime strength, regardless of which dragon, or regardless of which adventurer rather, Hastur is equipped to, he's going to be applying that buff to your lead unit. So when max and bound, it's 15% for 10 seconds. With fewer copies, it's only 10% for 10 seconds, so it is weaker. One of the weaknesses with Hastur is the fact that the primed ability can only activate every 15 seconds, and it only lasts for 10 seconds once active. So you're always going to have a period of downtime with this, and the way the math works out, I think in the best case scenario with full uptime on primed, you're still looking at a dragon who on average has a weaker strength aura than Zephyr, when you consider the primed effect applying to the adventurer that Hastur's equipped to. So for co-op, probably weaker than Zephyr in most scenarios, unless the skill or dragon form of Hastur is a lot better than I think it is. So in that setting, Hastur's not great, but in single player, you can use Hastur or even multiple Hastur to funnel strength buffs to your lead adventurer and potentially deal a lot of damage, especially if there's someone, like I said, who can induce bleed. So I think Hastur is a pretty well balanced dragon, nothing broken by any means, but I could certainly see Hastur having a role in late game Mercurial Gauntlet. The other thing that's more of a novelty that I think's fun, I want to point out, is with Void Volley, this is the first time a dragon can inflict sleep, and so this does give Hastur some room, similar to how High Midgard Stormer was used on Odric in the triple Galacleo clears of Master High Jupiter's Trial. Hastur can be used similarly, and the other thing he can be used for is with Hawk. So Hawk can inflict stun with around a 61% chance with the Chocolatiers on, I think, any or maybe all but one or two of the Master High Dragons. And so with Hawk, you can always have a shot at fading the opening blast, and in trials like High Mercury's Trial, where there's not too many unavoidable attacks, that's pretty good. It means that you can bring an entire DPS team without Prince, dodge the rest of the match. Of course, your mileage may vary. Some people in public lobbies might not know that, or they might not want to put up with a 61% roulette repeatedly. But the thing that I think is kind of fun is you could then give Hawk Hastur, and later in the fight also cause sleep. So this worked in the previous or reverse direction before. So for instance, Linyu or Wedding Aoi could inflict sleep and then be equipped with a dragon like Zephyr who can inflict stun, but now this gives adventurers who can already inflict stun a way to inflict sleep. And I do want to say, I think it's kind of fun how they've handled afflictions with the Master High Dragon trials. That's one area that I do feel is deserving of praise, but I don't want to dwell on or get into high dragons any more than I have to. I have been avoiding them, just doing the bare minimum in terms of weeklies. I instead decided to dump all of my stamina, all of my wings into Imperial Onslaught so I can try finish that up. I only have one weapon type left to finalize all of my dojos, so there are still some projects that are motivating me to keep going, even as I avoid high dragons like the plague at this point. But that's a whole can of worms that has been discussed ad nauseum at this point, so I don't really want to add anything on that in this video. The last thing I want to say is Hastur, to me, looks like a Mega Evolved Superior. That's it for this video, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed watching it. If you are a Pokemon fan, I hope that you got that reference and that you have a lot of fun with Sword and Shield coming out soon. I'm probably going to be chilling with that as Dragalia reruns continue, but hopefully we'll have something fun with Mega Man pretty soon. Once again, that's going to do it for this video, so thank you everyone for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.